Tonight, Judy Hilyard joins us at Arts and Letters with a little history about herself, her memoir, Soul Companion, and how she became an Anam Cara and an Anam Ira. Judy is a retired ICU nurse with almost 50 years of experience. She's a seeker of knowledge and achieved 2 master's degrees to enhance her nursing and leadership practice. Toward the end of Judy's nursing career, she learned to be an Anam Cara, a soul friend, assisting those at the end of their lives to come to a peaceful death. Judy also became an Anam Ira, the ancient Celtic practice of working across the veil between physical life and death for the benefit of the dying, those who have died, or for loved ones still living. Judy's book, Soul Companion, a memoir, tells the story of Judy's experiences working on both sides of the veil as an Anam Cara and an Anam Ira, facilitating healing for all involved. She says, out of this world, love, joy, and peace are the results of those connections and healings. Good evening, Judy, and welcome to Arts and Letters.
Well, thank you, Jenna and David. David's behind the scenes. And thank you, Anne and Art Presence, for hosting this. And thank you, all of you who have shown up on Zoom. I want to tell you a little bit more about what Anam Cara means and Anam Ira means, and then I'll get into some more detail. The word Anam Cara means, it's Celtic word, means soul friend. And it's working, what I do is work with people as they're finishing their lives to help them complete any psychological or spiritual issues that they may have so that they can have a peaceful death. Anam Ira is Celtic for care of the soul, carer, C-A-R-A-R-E-R, of the soul. And it's working with the soul of someone. And it can be on either side of the veil. The veil meaning an energetic barrier between physical life and death. So towards the end of my career in critical care, I took a couple of 2-year programs from the Sacred Art of Living Center in Bend, Oregon. Tonight, I want to focus on the second program, which was called, or is called, the Anam Cara Apprenticeship. And for those of us signed up, it was teaching people, it would be teaching us a new way of working with people at the end of life. And for me, that was very different from what I was used to in an ICU. The patients in an ICU in general were there for us to help save their lives. So the patient, the family, the doctors, the nurses, everybody was focused on taking care of the patient and helping the patient live. And that's what they were there for, and that's what we were there for. However, there were times when the patient wasn't going to make it and didn't make it. And the thing that I became problematic for me, that we weren't doing anything to potentially get people ready to prepare them for dying, the family or the patient themselves. So I wanted to learn other ways that we could work with the dying in a hospital setting. So I signed up for the Anam Cara Apprenticeship. And on the first hour of that first day of that first year of the apprenticeship, I heard something from Richard Groves, who is the creator of the apprenticeship and also the creator of the center that I was taking this training from. But he said something that I had not heard him say before, and it knocked my socks off. It just stunned me to my core. He said, you know, some Anam Caras in the Celtic time had a special ability. They could not only walk with someone to dying, they could walk with someone through dying. They could escort them to the other side of the veil. And they were called Anam Ira, a carer of the soul. I felt like I'd been hit with a bolt of electricity. I sat up straight in my chair and said to myself, I need to know how to do that. And I had no idea why I thought that. And I found out that I wasn't going to learn that kind of skill in the Anam Cara apprenticeship. In my book, it details how I did learn to do this Anam Ira work. But right now, what I would like to do is tell you about my first experience as an Anam Ira, escorting a person across the veil at their moment of death. It was 4 years after I heard those words from Richard, and it happened during Thanksgiving week of 2013. My friend Kathy had called me and asked me if I could do anything to help her 85-year-old twin sister who was dying in Southern California. Her sister, Karen, was not responsive, but was restless and agitated. She had caregivers around the clock, and they were having a hard time keeping her from falling out of bed. At that time, I had never connected with anybody who hadn't already passed over to the other side. So I didn't know if I could connect with someone who was still alive. But I decided that I would try the same thing that I did otherwise, that I did to connect with people on the other side. I put on a special CD, got into a meditative state, and called her name. And suddenly I was in Karen's room with her soul, and her soul was up above her body. I asked if there was anything I could do to help her. She said no. She wanted me to go away. I decided to hang out and see if she would change her mind, and she did. She agreed that I could come back the next day to talk with her. So I called her sister and let her know what had happened. And then the next day around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I sat down in my chair, got in my meditative state, and called her name. She answered immediately, initially pretty irritated that it had taken me so long to get back. But she settled down quite quickly. She told me that she was afraid to die because she thought she would go to hell, because in her words, she had been an angry bitch her whole life. After some conversation back and forth about the fact that there is no hell on the other side, I asked her if she would listen to me as I told her who she really was. Karen, you are a precious holy being, full of love and understanding and compassion for that body. That body is not you. You are beyond, above, and wholly greater than your body. You are love. You are holy. You are an integral part of God. You are now, you have always been, and you will always be. Karen is silent, listening, barely breathing, taking it in, allowing it to sink into her awareness, into her soul, into her whole being. She starts to cry, a cry of release of judgment, anger, distrust, isolation, loneliness, fear, the release of all of her negative feelings towards herself and others for a lifetime. Stillness now, profound, precious stillness, peace, being held on the wings of love. There are people surrounding Karen, people from the other side who love her for the beautiful soul that she is. Stillness, peace, riding a smooth, long wave of profound stillness, being held, being lifted, gliding along on the current of stillness, the overwhelming exquisiteness of this, the immeasurable depth of stillness, peace, and joy. This incredible stillness lasts for some time. I have no idea how long, because it feels like forever. The encounter is so profound that I am barely breathing, not wanting to disturb the atmosphere. The stillness there and the stillness here are the same. The stillness that is surrounding Karen is also surrounding me. The profound stillness that surrounds me and my little cottage. Stillness beyond expression. Karen's family, her parents and loved ones that she has known in this lifetime and in other lifetimes are surrounding her. They are holding her, hugging her, loving her. She is taking it in, allowing love to fill her. Joy, peacefulness, the golden light of love. After some time, the experience fades and I am back in my cottage. But I am changed. I don't know how I've changed at that point, but I know I'm different. From that moment on, I knew, truly knew who we are, who I am. I am, and everyone else is. Everyone else is a soul, spirit, mind stream, whatever the descriptor. We are beyond all description. I was in a state of bliss for several hours that afternoon. I called Kathy later in the day to let her know that I would be writing up the encounter that I had with her sister, and we decided to get together at her place the next day. Kathy also told me that she had gotten a call from her sister's caregivers and that her sister had died around 3 p.m. that afternoon. I had been connected with her sister from around 1 to about 1:40 in the afternoon. I thought I must have helped her get ready for dying. I didn't know what else to call what I had just experienced. The next day, I went over to see Kathy with a write-up of my experience with her sister. Kathy said that the caregiver had told her that Karen had suddenly become quiet and peaceful around 1 p.m. The caregivers also said that her sister had been pronounced deceased by the hospice nurse at 3 p.m., but she had stopped breathing and her heart had stopped at 1:20. That was when I was with Karen. That was when the stillness, the joy, and the peace were present. I had escorted Karen across the veil at her moment of death. I just didn't know that's what I was doing at the time. I had become an Anam Ira, an escorter of a soul across the veil at the moment of death. What had shaken me to my core 4 years earlier, I had just become. There are many amazing stories in my book, Soul Companion, experiences that I've lived, but I'd like to highlight just one more, and then we can open up for questions. Samuel was a 90-year-old Jewish man living in a small town in Oregon. His early life was much different than the peaceful life he was now living. He had been a teenager in Germany when the Nazis came into power. His father was killed early in the Nazi takeover of the country. Samuel lived with his mother Gertrude and sister Leah in Berlin as they tried to stay safe and keep a low profile. The time came when all the Jews were rounded up in Berlin and taken to the camps, prison, or killed immediately. Samuel, his mother and sister were not home that day when the Nazis came through their neighborhood. They were not caught. When they came home later that evening, there was a sign on their door marking it a Jewish place. They left immediately. Through friends, they were able to find a small room in which to live and hide in another section of town. The family didn't leave during the day so that no one would know that they were there. But all of their belongings, money, and papers were in their old apartments. So over time, one or more of them would sneak back to the abandoned apartment during the night to get what they needed. Samuel and Leah had gotten their money out and buried it in a cemetery where they could all have access to it as needed over time, and they would all know where it was if they got separated. One night, Samuel's mother went out, maybe to get something from the apartment, but she never came back. Samuel thought that she had been caught at their old apartment because it was being watched. The neighbors were obliged to turn in any Jews. Although very saddened and worried about their mother's disappearance, Samuel and Leah still had to survive, hiding in the middle of Berlin as two young Jewish teens. Toward the end of the war, Samuel got caught twice, beaten and tortured, but managed to escape both times. Leah never got caught and was free to come out of hiding when the Allies came through Berlin at the end of the war. Because Samuel had been captured, he and his sister were separated for some period of time. They joyfully found each other after the war was over and eventually immigrated to the United States. Years afterward, Samuel gained access. Excuse me. Years afterwards, Samuel gained access to Nazi papers related to his mother's death. The papers said that she had committed suicide and had been buried outside the walls of a Berlin cemetery. It was common not to allow burial of a person who had died from suicide on the sacred grounds. After years of searching, Samuel found his mother's grave outside the walls of an old cemetery. I met Samuel when I was asked by his wife to give him some Reiki treatments. He was in his mid-80s at that point. He had written a small book about his life during World War II for his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. He had never talked about the war years to his wife or to his children as they were growing up. Before he died, he wanted his family to know about his early life. Samuel gave me a copy of his book one day when I was visiting with him. After I read it, I asked more questions about his story. He told me that one of the things that he told me was that he had forgiven the Nazis for what they did to him, but he could not forgive the Nazis for what they did to his mother. He did not want to forgive, he did not want to forget, and he did not want to talk about it anymore. So we didn't. About a year later, I heard that Samuel's slow-growing cancer was starting to spread aggressively. I asked if I could talk to him about any preparation for dying that he might want to do, my Anam Ira work. He said, yes, I could. I asked him if he was interested in revisiting the issue of his mother's death and his unwillingness to forgive those he thought responsible. He said, yes, he was interested. In all of that time that had passed, Samuel told me that he felt that maybe his mother had committed suicide rather than break under torture and tell the Nazis where her children were hiding. He was also worried that his mother was in hell for taking her own life. If his mother had killed herself to protect him, he felt very responsible for her death. Since his mother died early in the war, Samuel also wondered if the Nazis had actually killed her, but put it down on the paper as suicide, as a way of staining the Jewish name, and protecting their own reputation. As Samuel told me these worries, he sobbed. He had carried these worries for a very long time. Initially, I thought I would take Samuel through a forgiveness process that I had learned, that it worked very well for me. I had taken myself through it and been very successful. But as I contemplated how I could help him, I decided that if I could connect in with his mother, Samuel could experience her as she is now, rather than the image that he had created of her at the hands of the brutal Nazis. Even if his mother had taken her life, it may have been in protection of her children. I didn't think she would be stuck or in any kind of hell for that selfless act. I was able to connect with his mother very easily. She was not in any hell. She was in a most wonderful place, and she is a most amazing and incredible being. Gertrude and the space she is in have a vibrant glow of golden light, the glow of joy and love and deep and abiding peace. Gertrude is the pure essence of that deep love and profound joy. I say to her, Gertrude, your son Samuel would like to connect with you. Gertrude answers to her son directly. Yes, I am here, my dear son. I have much to share with you. I want you to know that I am exquisitely well. I have been so since coming here. My transition was as it needed to be and of no consequence or trauma. Just the transition from the physical life to love beyond earthly imagination. My last thoughts were of you and your sister. My last feelings on that side were of gratitude for my children and the love I had experienced, the love I gave and was dearly given. There is no greater joy than that. Dear son, release the images and thoughts you have of my passing. Release the concern, release the fear, release the guilt, release the worry, release your idea of responsibility to me and protection of me. They are of your imagination and not of the reality I experienced. Son, remember my love for you and your sister. Remember only that, for that is what is important, of consequence. I realized later that in her message to Samuel, Gertrude never addressed how she died. And my experience is that of all of the people that I've connected with on the other side, which is many hundreds at this time, that they've never talked about how they died. It's like on the other side, the when, where, how, by what means, or by whom their death occurs is generally of no relevance after the transition has occurred. It's a means of transitioning from the physical to the non-physical, of no more significance than the importance of a doorway walked through to get from one room to another. Gertrude continued, I've met so many of our family and friends upon arriving here. Such a loving welcome. It could not be otherwise. Our lives on earth are as we plan and intend. The life all humans live, the life you are living, is about opening to profound love and compassion for who we think we are and who we think others are. There really is no difference. The lessons, the hard, challenging lessons, when learned, have great reward. The thrill, the exquisite joy and celebration experienced here on the completion of difficult lessons attempted, and experienced are dearly worth it and are beyond any concept of real difficulty in the larger picture of growth. You have almost completed your honorable, loving life. You have much to be proud of. You chose a difficult and taxing lesson, and you're in your final phases of loving completion. Fear not, worry not, be not concerned for me or any of our family and friends. We are in joyful reunion with each other and all there is. There is no greater joy or reward. There is nothing to desire. There is only light and love of our being. There will be such a celebration when you transition. Joy, light, lightness, and oh, the love, the profound, ever present, all illuminating love of all. Peace and love and light, my dear son. Peace and love and the light of all be with you and your wife, Sarah. You have done very well. Your joy and peace will be beyond anything you can now imagine. We will help you tap into that now. Peace, my dear son. Peace, love, now and always. As I read this communication to Samuel, he cried deeply. He was releasing over 70 years of worry, fear, guilt, and not knowing, only imagining his mother in a most frightful situation. After some time, he looked up, took a deep breath, sat back in his chair. He had a big smile on his face. There were no words necessary. I checked on Samuel sometime later. He had indeed let go of 7 decades of worry and guilt that had burdened him. He had let go of the image of his mother in a terrible situation and was seeing Gertrude as she is now, a most wondrous being of love and light. He arrived at forgiveness of himself and of the Nazis. He had embraced forgiveness of everything needing forgiveness in his life. He was quiet and peaceful within himself. He was free, and he exited this world that way. So I think, Jenna, I think we can open it up to questions now.
Okay, hello. In light of that story, do you believe in divine retribution? I mean,
No.
Is there retribution for anything done on?
No. What? So it could be complicated, but we all come in with lessons that we want to learn. Our soul comes in with lessons that we want to learn. And we have a soul family on the other side, and different members of that soul family will sign up for different positions, functions. So if I want to learn something where I have to forgive something really terrible, there's a soul on the other side who is signed up to do that terrible thing to me, so that I have to work through the forgiveness. So there's no such thing as retribution. We all sign up for what we want to deal with, and at times that's hard to maybe be okay with. You have to sort of be able to look at it from the other point of view, from the point of view of your soul,
Mm-hmm.
to make it make sense sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer that?
Yes, it does. Can you tell me what you see on the other side? What a person, what people look like, or what the soul, is there a vision of it, or is it, pure light, or what do you see? Does it depend on who you are and what you imagine and what you find over there?
I think it for some degree, I think it matters how I, in my personal makeup, can see or not see or perceive. So different people, I think, see things somewhat differently. What I experience is, like, I can see beautiful environment over there. You know, there's one place where people go after they die. It's called the Park and Focus 27, and it's incredibly beautiful and vibrant, and it's just vibrating with love. When I see a person there, I generally can't, if somebody asks me what they look like, I can't say. I don't know if it's that I don't have the ability, I think it is, to say that. But I know, it's like when I call a person's name, then I show up immediately wherever they are. And there are times when I've seen, like, Gertrude is, there's only been, I think, 2 other people that I've seen over there that are like her. Like, she was just this brilliant light. She had no form, was just brilliant, incredible, loving light. And people that show up that way are, I think, very high souls. And I mean, and I've seen, like, well, I don't want to get into that because it would take a little bit too long. So there are other answers, but.
That's a good answer. One person asks, basically, do you believe in God? Do you have a personal relationship with God?
I experience God as this incredible, loving presence that when I'm working on the other side and I'm taking down what, it's not exactly what I hear, but it's like this flowing information, and I'm writing it as it's happening. And my experience with that being or that energy tends to, what the words come out as is all there is. All there is. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there was a time in my life where I didn't believe in God, and I don't use the word God. To me, the word God is too small. But there's a creator source. There's this incredible loving experience, presence on the other side. It's just this incredible presence. Mm-hmm. So.
Another Judy asks if you ever connect with animal souls.
Yes.
I know the answer to that.
I had a little dog, Sophie, who died several years ago now. And I was doing this work, and when she died, I wanted to go over with her. I wanted to be an Anam Ira, going over with her. And I was just so sad, and I was just crying. I couldn't do it. And she died like at midnight. And I was up all night. I think I was just crying and petting her. Around 9 o'clock the next morning, I just closed my eyes. I didn't go to sleep, but I closed my eyes, and all of a sudden I could see her on the other side. And she had sort of the same form, but she was this brilliant, bubbly light. And she was playing, and, she was bouncing around like she and I used to play. And she was just this loving, brilliant light. And she was playing with somebody. And initially I was focused on Sophie, and then I thought, well, I wonder who she's playing with. And I sort of focused closer to this person who also was this loving light. And it was me. It was me. I was on both sides of the veil. I was here. Sophie was laying in the chair next to me, dead, physical body, and she and I were on the other side playing together.
Mm-hmm. Do you, this is a really interesting question. I'll just read this to you. Lisa asks, is there any connection that you've made with astrology that the time of one's entry in planetary alignment are important? And do you think astrology can help us to discern our life's purpose or lessons?
I don't know much of anything about astrology, but I do think that, and I used to in my younger years think it was poppycock, but I don't think that anymore. Although I don't have any skill in that, but I do think that the time of our birth and the positions of the planets and all of that have an important influence on our life, but I don't have any personal skill in that.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about how you learned the Anam Cara and or whichever you would like to talk about, the process of what you have to learn in order to, or maybe unlearn, in order to do this work?
Well, the Anam Ira work I learned in that 2-year program, the 2-year apprenticeship.
And that was at the Monroe Institute?
No, that was
No.
at the Sacred Art of Living Center.
Oh, yes. Okay.
In Bend. How I learned to do the Anam Ira stuff, going across the veil.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the Monroe Institute in Virginia, which I had first heard about them like in 1985, and I had always wanted to go there. It's a place that teaches people to expand their level of consciousness out to the other side of the veil. So I figured that if I went there and learned how to do that, I mean, I had thought that there were it seemed to me that there were two parts of the process of escorting somebody over. First, I had to know when they were leaving so I could go with them. And secondly, I thought, well, if I'm escorting somebody to the other side of the veil, I need to know how to go there and where to go and all of that. So I thought if I went to the Monroe Institute, I could learn that part, which I did. I went there and took 3 different programs. And when I came back here, well, one thing I would say at the Monroe Institute, one of the programs that I took taught us to go find people who were stuck, who had died but didn't know they were dead, and they were sort of in this stuck place. And I learned how to do that. But in the Monroe Institute, we weren't learning how to go find somebody specific. We would just go to this level of awareness where stuck people were hanging out. So when I got back here and I met with a lot of my friends, and they started asking me to go find this person or that person. And at first I didn't know if I could find somebody specific. So I said, okay, well, maybe I'll just say, just give me their legal name. So that's what I've been using is I get into this meditative state and then I say their legal name, and then I'm wherever they are.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about your past lives. Can you give us one story about connecting with yourself?
Yes. There's actually several, but so I'll give you a really interesting one. Well, they're all very interesting, but when I was at the Monroe Institute learning how to go find stuck people, there's one area of the the other side, where if somebody has a strong belief about what's going to happen when they die, that's where they go. And Bob Monroe called it the belief system territory. And the stuck place was called, it's called Focus 23. So in my experience, I had to move over the belief system territory to get them to where they would be helped and could be taken care of. And one day I was traveling and I felt this pull down, and I was over the belief system territory, and I didn't want to go there because I had grown up in a fundamentalist evangelical environment, and I didn't want to get caught in that. So I went to where the stuck people were, and there was nobody there, and there'd always been people there. There'd always been people that I was helping. So I thought, okay, maybe they want me to go back. So I went back over the belief system, got sucked down. And where I ended up is in this small stone room with this nun. And she was pacing back and forth and saying to herself, I need to get out of here. I don't believe this stuff anymore. I need to get out of here. I need to get out of here. And my understanding was her name was Sister Mary. So I started having this conversation with her that I could help her move out of here. She was like, and yes, she did. And off to the side, there was a pillar, and I could see these other nuns sticking their head out around the pillar, but I was focused on talking to Sister Mary. So she said, yes, let's go, get me out of here. So I took her hand and I started to sort of lift off. And as she lifted up, one of the nuns came running out and took her other hand. And then another nun came and took that nun's hand. So there were like 6 or 7 nuns in a row, and I'm the leader of it. It reminded me of, I can't think of the movie. Anyway, so I get to this place where I always bring people to where they can get help and get support. And I had created the sort of landing spot. So I stepped down and I sort of stepped off to the side, and then Sister Mary stepped down. And then the next nun stepped down behind her and went into the back of Sister Mary. And then the next nun stepped down and went into the back of Sister Mary until they all had stepped down and gone into the back of Sister Mary. So then there's just Sister Mary standing there. And I had a guide who was always there and would take people to where they needed to go next. But she didn't do it that time. So that this nun, Sister Mary, turned around and walked towards me. And when she got right in front of me, she turned around and backed into me. And I felt complete. And I didn't know I felt incomplete before. I mean, I felt complete. And the realization of these other nuns, they all had a derivation of Sister Mary, the name of Sister Mary. Well, the funny thing was, I don't know, it's strange. There were 2 people, and one of them was Richard Groves from the Sacred Art of Living Center. One time I went up to him to ask him a question when I was taking the apprenticeship. And he, as I walked up, he said, you know, I always want to call you Sister Mary. I mean, that was way before I had this experience. And then there was a friend here in town that she always wanted to call me Mary. So when I got back home, I called her and said, okay, now you can call me Sister Mary.
Now I know why.
Now I know why, yes.
Okay, it's almost 5 of 6. I think we have time for 2 more questions. This is a really great one. What do you make of people who have near-death experiences, and have you spoken with anyone who has returned?
I haven't personally, no. I, I certainly believe that the near-death experiences are true. And what happens with them is that at some point when they're over there, somebody's telling them it's not time, it's not your time, you need to go back. And I mean, I've known some people here that I've talked to. I haven't met anybody over there that was having a near-death experience, but I've met people here, friends here, who have had a near-death experience. Mm-hmm. And it's very profound.
Okay, my favorite question, which I've saved till last, is knowing what you know now, what would you tell your younger self about how to live a life?
I would tell myself to not be afraid of anything, to just go for it and live a large life.
And that is being true to yourself?
Yes, yes. There was a lot of my life I was scared of people, and I was shy, and I would have told myself, there's nothing to be afraid of. Go live your life.
Beautiful. So how would you, first of all, I'd like to know if may I give people your email address?
Sure.
If you would like to communicate with Judy, it's Judy Hilyard, spelled JudyHilyard at me.com. And phone number as well. You give the phone number here. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
541-531-6804. And you can talk to Judy and maybe ask her a few more of your questions, since we won't really have time to get into some of these really wonderful long questions or long statements and questions. But I think you've given us a really good taste of what your beautiful book is about. The book Soul Companion, a memoir, is available at Art Presence in Jacksonville. Thank you, Judy. I have mine right here too to show up.
It's also, I dropped several copies off at Bloomsbury and Ashland the other day.
Okay. And we really appreciate your work. I do have one final question, and that is, when you're doing this work, how do you feel when it's done, when it's accomplished? Is it exhausting? Is it uplifting? Is it a little of both? What do you feel like inside and physically when you're through?
It's never exhausting. It's always uplifting and joyful. And I mean, there are times when I'm in a state of bliss for periods of time, but if it's not bliss, it's just joy. It's joy. It's joy.
Great. Thank you so much, Judy. I'm fortunate enough to have been involved in the publication of Judy's book. And David and I were very involved with Judy during that. And we got to know Judy, this wonderful spirit, as well as this beautiful work. We recommend the book highly. It will probably rattle your cage a little bit, and that's good. We love rattling people's cages. And you'll learn something about yourself. So go to Art Presence, go to Bloomsbury, wherever books are sold, you can order Judy's book. It's in global distribution, and you can contact Judy at judyhilyard@me.com. Thank you so much, Judy, and I hope we will have you on here in the memoir program sometime in the future. So thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it, and come to Art Presence over the weekend and pick up Judy's book and see our beautiful art display. Thank you so much.